Welcome to the Honest Healing Podcast, real talk for cycle breakers. I'm your host, Katie Delamon. If you're ready to speak up, set boundaries, heal your nervous system, and build better relationships, you're in the right place. Because you don't need to be perfect to heal. You just need to be honest. Let's go. Welcome to episode 18 of the Honest Healing Podcast. Better boundaries, better life. How to stop people pleasing. In today's episode, I'm joined by boundaries and behavioral coach, Bree Freeman. We talk all things boundaries. She is a boundary boss, and I absolutely love her mission, her energy, and her way to really get down to boundaries in a very simplistic and digestible way. We talk about why building boundaries with people we are closest to are actually the hardest, which we think should be the easiest, but it's not. The myths around boundaries and very simple, easy steps that you can take to start putting boundaries in place now. Let's jump in. Welcome to the podcast, Bree. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this topic is, as you know, we've talked about my favorite, and I literally feel, and I know you feel the same, that every solution to every single problem in your life, I don't care who you are and what it is, and how big or how small that problem is, the answer is always, always boundaries.
Always. This is my favorite word.
And I love it. Your name, Boundaries with Bree, it just goes perfectly. You were meant to do this. I love it.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah, yeah. So when someone says, because I say this all the time, you just need better boundaries, what do you think people actually misunderstand about that?
I think that they misunderstand that it's just the boundaries, right? Because if you actually meet, engage with, or know someone who has terrible boundaries, it's so much deeper than that. It's so much deeper than just the boundary. So, you can tell me just set a boundary. Okay, great. I can do it. But someone who is so used to being codependent or a people pleaser or, something else, it's not just that simple to say set a boundary. Like you are working against some demons, okay? That you're going to have
Mm,
to address first before they can get to a point where it's just like, okay, I'll set a boundary. Like they're not going to be able to do that if all their life they're used to people pleasing and all their life they've been codependent, whether that be in relationships with family, whatever that may be. They don't know how to just set a boundary.
yeah, that's exactly right. It is so much deeper than a boundary because, as we'll talk about, boundaries and not just setting a boundary, it's actually following through with the boundary, which so many people don't do 99% of the time. And also, we'll get into it as well. People think that boundaries are about the other people. Oh, well, they disrespected my boundaries. Girl, that is not a boundary. It's what you do, but we'll get into that. Now,
You are pretty big, yes.
oh, like yeah, anyways. So what's one boundary you see people say they have, but they don't actually enforce?
I probably won't say enforced, but I'll say boundaries in general. People think they're setting boundaries and you just mentioned it, but they're not. They're just talking out their ass, right?
Mm,
Or they're just saying something, but it's all talk and it's not about again what they're doing and with the follow through and with the consistency. So I feel like a lot of times people are saying, I set a boundary, and it's like, nah, you made a statement. Or I set a boundary, and it's like, nope, that was a rule. Like there is a very distinct
mm,
thing that needs to happen when you're setting a boundary and enforcing a boundary. And like you said, 95% of the people aren't doing that, but they think that they are,
mhm.
but they're not.
Yeah.
So I would just say majority of what people think they're doing when they're quote unquote setting a boundary, they're not. They can't even get to the enforcing part because they didn't clearly set the boundary to begin with.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has people don't actually know what they want. It is one
Mhm.
of the and that's what, like, if you're not clear on what you want, what your values are, and if you have 2 or 3 more values, you're gonna spend your life wildly distracted. If you are not clear on what you want, you will not be clear on boundaries, and if you don't have clear boundaries with yourself, how's anybody else gonna respect yours? So,
They don't.
they don't. What is the
They don't.
biggest myth about boundaries that you wish you could scream from the rooftops?
Uh, feel like the easy answer to that is that boundaries are selfish, because
Mm.
people do think that, but I think I would just fall in that boundaries are for the other person and boundaries are what you say. I think that's the biggest myth is people say I set a boundary and all they did was say something, when in reality a boundary, like I always say, is what you gonna do about it. Like the
Mhm.
boundary is the action. The boundary is what you're gonna do, not necessarily what you said. So I think the biggest myth is boundaries are just like what you say. They're just the statement and I said it and the end. And it's like, ah no, that was just the first step, actually.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the same thing with like manifesting. Like manifesting, I know is real. And most people think, well, if I just visualize it and I just get clear on what I want and I write it down and I think about it, but then
Mhm.
you don't take any action. Like, in order to manifest, you have to take a lot of action, a lot of risk, and you probably will fail a lot. Same with boundaries. You are
Yep.
going to get it wrong so much more of the time than you're going to get it right. But it's about the practice and the doing
Yep.
it and getting your
And the
hands dirty.
yeah.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the guilt. Why do so many good-hearted people feel so bad for saying no or upsetting someone, ruffling some feathers?
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. Just imagine you're everybody's savior and you're always the person who shows up and naturally you don't even know their response, but you're just fearing being that disappointment. It's uncomfortable. Like your nervous system is literally saying, what the fuck is going on? We've never done this before. This is something new. And it just automatically just triggers all of these things. So I always tell people guilt is natural. Just fucking get over it. Like people are like, how do I set a boundary without guilt? You don't. You just
Mm.
fucking do it, even though you feel guilty. You still do it. And then when you see what it feels like, you will begin to feel less guilty. Like once you
Mhm.
set the boundary and the world doesn't fucking end, you will realize, okay, I feel a little bit bad, right? But man, I feel better. It's either them or me at that point. And so it's really like I always tell my clients and I tell people the guilt is inevitable, but that does not mean stop. The guilt actually means keep going and do
Mhm.
not be discouraged by all those things that you're feeling. Like if you're gonna feel something bad, it might as well be feeling bad that you stood up for yourself.
That's right. And I believe that, the guilt is so much of a lighter feeling than regret or shame or
And resentment.
putting other people before you. Like your life gets lighter, literally, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of that.
All
So
of it.
I'm going to break the boundaries down into four categories because as you work with clients, I'm sure you see like, oh, they have really good boundaries with family, but not very good ones with their partners or their kids or at work or vice versa. So what from your own experience and your clients, what department do you think people have a harder time setting boundaries? Is that family? Is that partners, kids, or at work?
It would be a toss up between family and romantic relationships.
I
The
was
people that we,
gonna agree with that.
with. So and the family is the trickiest. The relationship part, I'm like, "Woo, easy peasy lemon squeezy." But when it comes to families, there's so much that goes into that dynamic, childhood history, what you've seen, generations. Like it's so deep that that is like probably I would say the hardest to break.
hmm I I
This
wholeheartedly agree. It seems
yeah,
the closer you are emotionally with somebody or the emotional baggage that you have, the way harder it is to not take things so personally and not be so afraid of how they're gonna respond.
because you
And
care about the
yeah.
relationship, you value that relationship and that connection, like, okay, you fall out with your friends every other month, you don't care, but like, Lord forbid, it's your sister.
Mm, yeah. Or your partner of 20 years that you have never been able to set a boundary with. And now, it's 20 years down the track and you're trying to set one. That's going to be hard.
It's
All
tricky.
right. Let's start with family then. How do you set a boundary with a family when you're scared of being labeled like the difficult one, or, if you're a woman, the bitch?
Mhm. My advice. with boundaries, no matter who it is to always start small. I think
Mm-hmm.
people get tired, right? And they're resentful and they're so tired of being stepped over, used, whatever that may be, that they want to go from 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And the important part about boundaries is the follow through. So you can't go from 0 to 100 if you know that 100 is not something that you're going to be able to stand on and follow through with. So I always give this example of like, maybe you have this sibling or family member who's always asking you for money. You know, when they call and they're like, hey, because you always do it, can I borrow $500? You know, I'm able to say, absolutely fucking not. But if you're someone who's been doing this time and time again, it's going to be so hard for them to just say no. So I always say, you can still say yes, but an easy way to do that is to say, I can't give you 500, but maybe I have 150. You know, no, I can't give you 500, but I can give you 100 and that's it. So it feels a little bit better because you didn't just say no, right? But you also didn't give them what would be too much for you. You're still like honoring yourself. You're still not overextending. You're still doing what it is that you can in that moment, and it'll get easier. Next time they call, maybe you feel more comfortable saying, I don't have it this time,
Mm-hmm.
call somebody else. But I always say no, but like you telling them no to what they're asking, but you're saying yes to what works for you.
Yeah. And, I even say myself, a boundary is not a negotiation, but I do believe that when you are starting out on the journey of boundaries, a lot of the times they have to start as negotiations, they have to start as requests, they have to, all the no-nos I tell people not to do. I'm like, well, but if you are starting off, like you probably will have to go through that phase where it's a bit of a request, it's a bit of a negotiation because you have to build your confidence
Hmm.
to then it becomes, no, this is what I stand for, and I'm happy to have an open dialogue, but this is where I'm at. So thank
Hmm.
you for giving those people pleasers a bit of, confidence that it doesn't have to be so harsh and like aggressive and like 0 to 100. You're not going to go from having really poor boundaries to having the healthiest one. And honestly, also reminding people that your life changes, your boundaries change. They're not always going to be the same. Life circumstances change. So you have to be flexible with boundaries. They're not rigid. They're
Yeah, and
different
they're
than,
not one size fit all. Like this, it's just no, it's not one size fit all. The goal is to just get as close to healthy across the board as possible. So
mm, now with partners, because this I find the partners is the trickiest, especially for women. I mean, look at, our history of time. We only now have been getting a voice in the last 10, 20 years, I feel, not even 50. Anyways, so where do people cross the line between a healthy compromise and that self-betrayal?
I think it just goes back to the beginning of what you said is knowing what you want. Sometimes, well, a lot of times in relationships, we get into them without being clear about what it is that we want and what we need. And so all this time goes by where things are making us uncomfortable or they might feel a little bit weird, but we never said anything about that because we never set any standards for ourselves. So now we look up and it's been 15 years of them doing this shit and now we're tired of it. And now we want to set a boundary, but it's like, how hard will that be? First of all, your partner's going to be confused because you've never mentioned any of this before being a problem, and now it is a problem. But the best thing is just it starts with knowing what you want. Knowing what you want, knowing if you can't think of that, knowing what you don't want. Because if you know that, the moment that it shows up, you're able to be like, okay, wait a minute. What is this? Like, let me check in with myself. Let me tap in with myself. Let me see what I'm feeling and let me be honest about what it is that I need. And the earlier you do it, the easier it is. I think when people are starting to date and they're dating someone new, They don't want to rub them the wrong way. They don't want to scare them off. That's the best time to do it, baby. Run it up. Get as crazy as you can just so they can know and see that this is what it is, right? And if you can't handle it now, you're not going to be able to handle it later, but at least you're weeding yourself out because I know that I need, right? And I want someone who's going to be respectful of my boundaries even if they don't agree with them. So I think the moment that it starts to feel like I really, really, really don't like this. Not I wouldn't prefer it, but I'll do it, right? Because I love them or I care about them. But the moment when you're doing something that you absolutely are positively sure you are not with, you're betraying yourself. That is where the line crosses. There might be some things that you don't feel that strongly about, so you don't have, those big feelings about it. But the things that you do have that you still let slide,
Mhm.
yeah, that's definitely the self-betrayal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think women have a really hard time understanding that self-betrayal because they think, oh, well, I don't mind. What's that line of I don't mind and you actually do care? Like, or actually, it is of value to you. You're just withering away your own self, your authentic self to fit into to make sure that everybody else is comfortable. Um, yeah, I mean, I see it so much, especially women, when they start to have kids and then they need to start sending boundaries with not only their own family, but other people's family. Like I'm not having kids or I don't plan on it. Um, I started setting boundaries with my husband's family from day dot. And
One,
he did not take it well for a while. And but now and like he totally gets it and understands it, but it took him a while to get there. And
yeah,
now, like, it's just, it just is part of the relationship. So, people don't like to be that uncomfortable one. It's a hard to do.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, and I think it always goes back to like your mindset because as difficult as it may be, me being self-aware, right, and me knowing myself, I know it's gonna be way more difficult for me to sit with these feelings than it is
mhm.
for me to tell somebody else, no. Okay, do that feel good? No, it doesn't, but it's not gonna feel good when I go back home and I can't fucking sleep and I'm ruminating in the shower and I'm doing all that shit for something that was so small. That doesn't feel good to me. And I don't want to feel it. So I am very adamant about setting my boundaries because I'm gonna be the one that's left to sit with those feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got to be so aware of the energy that you feel in your body. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of us are very disconnected from our bodies. Like that was my issue for the longest time. And so I want to talk a little bit about your story because your work with boundaries really started in your workplace. You started noticing you were in a lot of toxic work environments and you were probably blaming your asshole manager or, the colleague who's doing this all the time, who gets paid more than you, but doesn't keep up the amount of work you do. Can you walk us through your own experience and, yeah, a little bit about boundaries at work? Because you always have that friend who is always hates their job. And it's like, well, is it the company or maybe you're the common denominator?
Yeah, for sure. I think that it gets tricky at work because it's always attached to like our sanity, our livelihood, the roof over our heads, whatever that may be. But I was a young college grad. I had my BA in psychology, and I was a mail carrier, right? So, excuse me, I'm already thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? Right? I've got this degree. Why am I carrying mail? Working 7 days a week. 22, 23 years old with high blood pressure, stressed out, being bullied at work. Like
Oh.
that was my first time being bullied because I mean, again, and it's gonna go back into our family. My mother always told me you either work or you go to school, right? I didn't already went to school. I wasn't trying to go back to school, so I had a job. And I was also raised that you don't quit a job before you have another one, right? So that's me in the trenches for 4 years. 2 to 3 out of those 4 years, I'm dealing with this shit in the workplace, the toxic work environment. And so again, it got to a point where I was like, these people aren't going to change. These people don't have choices and options like I do. I'm young. I still live at home, thank God, with my mother, right? And I still have the safety of the roof over my head. And I'd literally be going on job interviews, like changing my clothes in the car to get back and go and head straight to work. Like I was trying to get myself out of that situation. And what ended up happening is they fake fired me, right? That was like the last straw of my bullying was getting sent home. And that was Memorial Day weekend, which is May. I did not get to go approved to go back to work until after Labor Day in September. And yeah, and that entire time I'm going on interviews, I'm applying to jobs because I don't want to have to go back, right? Know anything about the post office, the union is great. It's damn near impossible to get fired unless you're stealing. So I got my job back, get back to work. First day, bullying starts again. I just clocked in 5 minutes ago. And it just got to a point where I was like, I have to do something. So what I did, this was like the clinically, I probably was depressed. I was 22 years old, 23 years old, hated waking up in the morning because I did not want to go to work. I've never felt that to this day ever
Mm,
before. Like it was hard for me to get out of the bed, but I just kept going because that's just what we're raised to do. I eventually get into grad school. And so this is my out, right? Being raised, you go to work or you go to school. But the same day that I started grad school, I started a new job. So I was able to quit and leave that environment. 20, what? I was like 25 at that point. Um, so fast forward from 25 to when I was 33. I'm 35 now. So yeah, 33. I have a fully remote job and I have an issue with my manager, right? But still, I'm like, you know what? It's it's not that deep. I started therapy and I originally started therapy because I felt lonely. I felt like all my friends were on a different wavelength than me. They didn't really like want the same things. They were having kids and starting families and I was just like, I'm still young and turned. So,
mhm,
I started therapy and it eventually just got to a point where she asked me one day, the therapist asked me, "Do you do anything you don't want to do?" Because, like, she hears me talking and I'm talking about my boundaries and I'm talking about I don't do stuff I don't like to do, which is true. And I stopped. I really had to think, like, damn, do I do anything I don't want to do? And then I was like, wait, I do not like opening these people's laptop, right? Like, I had a work issue
mm,
laptop because I was struggling at work with this manager. I didn't really care for the like customers that I had to deal with. And once she put that bug in my head that I did not like working and
mm,
opening that laptop, I couldn't let it go. I'm like, I have to change that. I have to change that. But me, I'm still showing up. I'm trying to be the good employee. I'm assimilating, right? Trying to be what it is that they need me to be. And I remember the straw that broke the camel's back was I had a meeting with the supervisor that I didn't like, and my husband was home that day, and I was telling him, "Hey, I have this meeting, like, but it's okay. I'm gonna go in there with a good attitude. I'm gonna do all the small talk. I'm gonna just show up and be the star fucking employee." Girl, I got in this meeting, and when I say the man just drilled on me, like he was telling me that basically something that I did that was wrong. He didn't like that I said they asked me about a new project, how I felt about it, and I said, "Oh, I'm not excited about it, but like it's my job. Like I'm going to do it." You didn't like that I said I wasn't excited and it just drug that on. And I closed that meeting and I cried. And I told my husband like I did everything right, like I go in here with a positive attitude and they still tell me that I'm doing something wrong. And that just reminded me, right? It took me back to 23-year-old me being
mm,
bullied, being in a position of something that I didn't like. And I was just like, at this point, I don't have to deal with this. I don't live with my mama. Thankfully, I got a husband, right, who's gonna
mhm,
take care of me. And I said, I cannot do it. It sent me back to that time where I was my most depressed, where I was my most miserable, where I felt like I was being bullied in the workplace. I couldn't do anything right. And I told my husband that day, I said, these people got 2 more weeks. And the very last day of that 2 week, I sent an email to let them know today is my last day at 5 p.m. I sent that before lunch at like 1. And they were all just like shook. And I'm like, no, y'all keep telling me, like,
Mhm.
one thing that they wanted to put on me, they told me that I pretty much shape the culture, which is unfair because what the fuck? I don't get paid to do that, right? And I can't help that my personality is that of a leader, right? That's nothing to do with me. That's y'all business if that's what y'all think, but my job is the title that I get paid to do. And so they would always tell me, with great power comes great responsibility. And I hated hearing that because it was okay when I did what you wanted me to do. But
Mhm.
when I use my voice the way that I use it, it was a problem. And so in my
Mhm.
nice little resignation letter, I happily typed, with great, I've always been told as an employee here that with great power comes great responsibility. And it's my responsibility to acknowledge when I'm no longer in alignment with the company or its
Mhm.
team. And I said, let me know where I can send y'all laptop. I sent them laptop the next day, and the day after that, I caught a flight to Rome, and I have not looked back since.
Girl, I'm clapping over here because that is just your typical like moment where your 23-year-old self and your 33-year-old self was the exact same in the same situation. And you even approached it the same way you did at 23. Well, I'm just going to go in with a great attitude. I'm going to give my best, going to be a great employee. I'm
Yeah.
going to be the person they want me to be, and I'm going to do everything quote unquote right.
Hmm.
And you had done, 10 years of therapy. You left that toxic job, and yet here you were again 10
Again,
years later in that same situation. Why? Because you never actually stood up for that little girl at 23. You just ran away
I just kept going.
and you
Yeah,
just avoided and just, well, I'm just going to avoid all those uncomfortable situations. Whereas now your 33-year-old self is like, no, I'm going to actually break the cycle. And this may come up again, but it is definitely not going to, I'm not going to be in it for as long.
yeah. No,
And
you can't get food again.
no, 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 no. And you might for a little bit, just not as long, I think, where nobody's perfect, but like you broke that cycle and was like, no, I'm actually going to stand up for myself. I'm actually going to disappoint people and potentially even myself for a little bit. And and you were old enough to admit that, like, yeah, I still have this pattern going. And here we
And I
are.
think that, again, when you're being honest with yourself, I worked for a paycheck. Let's be clear.
Mhm.
The job that I did was not fulfilling. It wasn't something that I didn't think anybody else could do. I was not making a difference from my perspective in anybody's life. So if I'm really only working to get a paycheck, I can get a paycheck from anywhere. I can
They
create
may.
my own paycheck if I want to. So that the fact that it just boiled down to money when people
Mm,
are in jobs just in exchange for the work that they're doing, why can't you get another one? Why can't
nope.
you leave? What is the loyalty?
That is exactly it. And the thing is people think, well, if I have this really good job that's quote unquote, what people would deem as successful, then I'll be happy. But I couldn't be happy like making coffee or being a waitress. Like I worked at Lululemon 3 years ago in my like, I'm almost 40. And I'm like, I never thought I would go back to retail. And I had an amazing time. I had a
Yeah.
great discount. Like I had a great old time. I love the people I worked with. Like just because you're in a job doesn't mean you have to hate it. And if you keep finding jobs where there are toxic work environments, it's not the work. It's you're the common denominator. Like people have to check themselves before they wreck themselves. Like, why are you allowing yourself to stay in that toxic environment for one more day?
When you're the person who has the power to
Yeah,
say, all right, I'm done with this. This is getting old, it's getting tired. I don't want to do it anymore. That's all it takes, really.
yeah, that's it. Now, for all my compassionate people out there, why do you feel like people really mistake it's almost compassion fatigue and I think it, emotional boundaries, that's probably
Mhm.
what it is. People don't realize like where your energy ends and somebody else's begins. Why do you think compassionate people mistake like they look on the outside to have weak boundaries because they mistake it for being empathetic?
Yeah, because I always say people, you said it the right way, right? They don't know where their feelings stop and someone else's ends. But we have this complex that people need us. And I
Mm,
say it all the time. Don't nobody need you. Who the fuck do you think you are that you were just the savior and people just need you? They will be fine. They will be fine if you don't show up. They will be fine if you say no. They will learn how to keep fucking going. You know what I mean? But we have this idea that people need us. Nobody needs you but you.
mhm,
Nobody needs you but you. So, I think they mistake, that compassion and being a good person because, they're my friend or they're my family that I just have to do this. And it's just like, actually you don't.
no,
You're choosing to do that because you get something out of it. It feels
mm,
good to be able to say, I always show up. It feels good to be able to say, I do this for this person, this person, this person, and that person. You're getting something out of that. Otherwise, it would be easy for you to be like, can't do it today and feel
mhm,
nothing, right? But when we're so used to calling us being codependent as compassionate and all these
mm,
other things, and we're mixing the words and blending the words, that's how we end up seeing like the compassionate people having weak boundaries when it's really like, is it that? Or
mm.
is it something else? Like, let's
Yeah.
just call it a spade. Let's call it what it is.
People pleasing isn't out of kindness. It's out of self like preservation and for their own, like you said, you are getting something out of it, but we're calling
Mhm.
it, oh, but I love being kind. Yeah, because you get something out of it, not because and I'm not saying people don't want to be nice people, but they really don't know how to turn that mirror on themselves and realize that it's almost when you're that people pleaser, it started as a parent pleaser and it really comes from a narcissistic place, is what it is.
And there's a
Um,
difference between being nice, right, and being kind. I don't know anybody who would describe me as being a nice person, and
mm,
I'm not offended by that. I absolutely love it. I would be offended if you did call me nice because I'm not nice. Nice is performative, right? Nice gets you played with. Nice is it's flexible. You might be nice for what reason, right? But being kind, it's just being a good person. It's being open. It's being honest. It's having boundaries. It's not doing something in the expectation that you get something in return. That's what nice people do.
mhm.
Nice people are nice for a reason. I am not a nice person, but I am definitely kind.
Yes, I love that distinction. I never heard anybody say it like that. I mean, it's so just on the dot. And it goes back to, I always say, when people think, oh, you got to fill your cup up, fill your cup up. I'm like, you got to keep that shit overflowing because what's in the cup is for you. What comes out is for everybody else. If you're giving from a cup that's even a quarter like less full, like you're still coming from a place of depletion when
Yeah.
you give from a place of like, I'm doing this because I already feel so like it's not, I'm not,
Yep. You're not
wasting any,
losing
no,
anything.
not losing
Yeah, and
anything.
I love that you said that. I've never heard of the cup needs to be overflowing because I always say, they say you can't pour from an empty cup. And I'm always like, well, the cups aren't just empty. They fucking cracked, they're broken, it's nothing in them, they're bone dry. Like those are the cups that people are pouring from and wondering why, why their health is declining, why their finances are terrible, why their relationships aren't healthy. But it's like you said, like the cup should be overflowing to where there's enough to go around that you don't feel the lack. And that I think that, people are my friends would always say, like, I'm the friend that always shows up. They could say that and be so true, but then there always be like, Brianna be to herself and she got her boundaries. And it's like, exactly. But I'm able to show up because I
Mhm.
do say no. I'm able to show up because I don't overextend myself. If I don't have the capacity to do it, if I don't fucking want to do it because the sky is blue, I'm not going to do it. But
Yes.
because my cup, like you say, I'm pouring into myself, it's overflowing. When someone does need me, when someone does call on me, I'm there because
Hmm.
I can be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Boundaries, girl, I am with you. I really feel like all my relationships now boil down to values, yes, but boundaries.
Mhm.
And love, boundaries is love. It keeps your love honest. Like, I just, yeah, I am with you, girl. Boundaries is everything. So, what are three things someone can do today to start rebuilding? Because essentially it is self-trust and boundaries.
Mhm. Being honest with
Mm,
themselves. We've said this a lot of times, just being real about what it is that you really need, not what you think other people think that you need.
you
Being
saw on
real.
Instagram.
Yes, like be real about what it is that you need is the first thing. The second thing that I would say is start testing, right? And believing your no. Like if your first mind is fucking no, trust that.
Mm,
It's okay. Even if it feels uncomfortable, just remember before you did that thing that you didn't really want to do, the first response was no. Like you have to get comfortable with accepting and believing your no the first time before you can ever trust yourself. Like trusting your feelings, trusting your emotions the very first time is something that people can do to also rebuild and give yourself grace. I always say
mm,
that. Like I think that when you first start setting boundaries, it is going to be tricky. You do have to learn to trust yourself, but you also have to learn to be graceful. Like you
mm,
said, you gonna fuck up. And it's
mhm.
okay. It is okay, but do not beat yourself up about it, right? Don't be discouraged to not do it again just because
Mm,
it felt a little uncomfortable. Like, keep going. And the more that you keep going, the more that you keep trying, that's where the self trust comes from. You don't get the trust by not doing anything, by avoiding it, by dismissing it, by pretending, right, that it doesn't matter. It doesn't happen like that.
no. And one of my favorite women of all time, do you know Iyanla Van Zant?
Hmm.
Yeah, she always says, practice saying no for an entire day. Anything anybody says to you, no. Just for one day, you just say no the whole day. I've
Yeah.
never done it personally, but
Yeah,
I
me
think
either.
it's just like hilarious. It's for as like a little trial for somebody. Um,
Yeah.
so how do you think someone can start saying no in micro ways that feel safe? I mean, you touched upon it, like starting small. And I always bring it back to starting with yourself. So
Mhm.
when you say, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week, I'm going to blah, 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 put all these crazy goals that you know you're not going to stick to, you are telling your nervous system that your word doesn't matter. And so you got to start with yourself. Everybody thinks the boundaries are about other people. It's about you.
Yeah, you conditioning yourself because if you playing with yourself, you're not gonna even notice when somebody else playing with you because you do it to yourself, right? Like,
Mm,
yeah, the no's for me, um, it's so easy for me to do it with a stranger. Because right, I don't know these people, I might not ever see them again. So when someone's asking me that, it's very easy for me to say, no. But I always say again, start small. If you know
mm,
that you just can't say outright no, say no to the thing that they're asking and say yes to what it is that you want to do.
yeah.
That's the micro way to do it is you're saying the it's pleasing the people pleaser in you to still do something, right? Because we are fucking saviors, like I said. You have to
Mm,
do something, you have to show up, but just don't always be so agreeable to everyone. If you feel that feeling of, oh, I don't really want to do this, then just try saying, like, oh, you help me move on Saturday? Instead of just saying yes, give yourself a time. Yeah, I can help you from 9 to 12, but then I have something else to do.
yep. Yes.
That's like you're still saying yes, but you're also saying no in a way that honors you. And those little bitty tweaks, those little bitty changes, once you start seeing how good it feels to take your ass home at 12 instead of staying until 3 o'clock, they ain't gave you no food, no water, no nothing.
Mm,
Trust your body will want that again. It will crave that again because it feels so good to
yeah.
put yourself first and to not just do what everyone wants you to do, that you will be looking for
Mhm.
opportunities to do it again.
Yeah. And once, so people with unhealthy boundaries don't understand and usually don't respect other people with healthy boundaries. But people with healthy boundaries, when somebody tells me their boundary, I'm like, oh, I,
Girl,
even though I didn't want to hear that, I'm like, that is so sexy. I asked this one person to be on my podcast, and they're like, my new rule is I either get paid or the podcast has to be running for at least 3 years. Otherwise, I'm not doing it because I don't want my intellectual property to just be lost. And I'm like,
okay.
I'm sad that you're not going to be able to come out because I don't pay people. But second, I love that rule. Like, you
I
go,
love
like,
that. Yes,
love
because
your
that's what works for
boundaries.
you.
Yes,
Yes, I
you are
absolutely love
clear.
it.
You are clear and you are turning me down right now, but it is not offensive. I'm like, I love that. And you know what? You just inspired me to make my own rule in life. Like, that's what I should be saying. Like, I love people with strong, healthy, clear fucking boundaries. So
Me too.
sexy.
I love to see a boundary coming, like you said, even though I'm like, damn, I would have liked it my way, right? Because we're
Yeah.
human. But
Yeah.
it's like, oh, one less person in the world that's not a weak bitch. I love it. Tell me no. Yes.
Yes, I know. I love it. I love it. Love it. So could you share like a real client story? You don't have to give any names where a boundary literally changed everything.
Yes, for sure. I had a client who was an entrepreneur, right? I feel like there's always a man in a store that just pisses me off, right? Entrepreneur doing well for herself, making her own money. Man comes into the picture. Of course, I'll take care of you, right? Okay, so now, I'm trusting this other person to do it, and I fall back in the swing of working for someone else in addition to running my business. So now we're at work, she's running her business, and this man is in the picture. And in that, she lost herself. Like,
Mm,
yeah, I'm like, you forgot you were a bad bitch and a boss bitch before he ever came into this picture. But now you're having to like reverse all these things that you learned. And I told her, I'm not the person that'll say this to anybody. You got to know who you're talking to when you tell somebody to leave a man, right? But
mhm,
I say you have to leave him. Like,
mm,
you have to leave. I don't know if you need help making a plan, I will help you make a plan, which I did. I helped her make a plan because you can't say it's October 11th, leave him by the end of the month. No, it's going to take some time. Right? You have
mhm,
to get into alignment. The moment that she decided, hadn't even moved out yet, the moment that she decided that she was leaving, she got a job making more money than she's ever made before. Went straight
mhm,
into 6 figures. Her business started popping off. She got this bomb luxury apartment that she's always wanted to. I said, and all this shit was on the other side of you not want to leave that man. Right?
mhm,
Like, it just starts with the first step. And even if you get in that job, the first offer that they sent was not the one that she got. I said, is that what you want? No, I want more. Kick that shit back and tell them that you want more. And what did they do? Comply.
yep,
It's that or that. When your standards are your standards and you know what you want and you're clear about what you want, it's not a loss when you don't get it. You never wanted it. You can't
mhm,
lose something that you didn't want.
yep,
So if they offering you for example, $80,000 and you want 106, why the fuck would you accept the $80,000?
yep. And the fact that people never ask is another huge one I see. Like they don't even bother to ask. Or especially with the boundaries, they think, oh, well, what's the point? They're not going to change. Or I don't want to make things harder for them or us. We're already stressed. They
Yeah.
won't want to hear me anyway. It's really not that big of a deal. I'll just let it go. If I bring it up, they'll just freak out and make everything worse. Or
How do you
they'll
know?
exactly. It's like,
How do
well,
you know?
let's try it out.
Let's try it. You don't know what's gonna happen. You just allowed your brain to go through all of these woulda, coulda, shouldas, negatives, and none of those options being it could fucking work out is crazy.
Mm-hmm. We've got
Yeah.
10. I mean, that's what the brain does to keep us safe. We know the negativity bias, but Anyways, so one last question, because I could talk about this forever. What is your favorite script or sentence for holding a boundary with grace and firmness?
So I always try to tell people and my clients that, we already said your boundaries aren't negotiable. They're not a question. There's a period at the end. But I always try to get them to look at their boundaries as a fact. And when you know something is a fact, that's it. Who the fuck is debating with something that they know is true? That's what it is. Like, I don't make the fucking rules. It's a fact. Even if I like it or if I don't like it, it's a fact. So when you're looking at your boundaries as factual, my favorite thing to say, which some people can't, right? But for me is that doesn't work for me.
Mm,
I really don't give a fuck what you say after that. I'm just gonna say it again. That doesn't work for me because I want you to be clear that this don't have shit to do with you, and it has everything to do with me. So if it's something that I don't want to do, if it might be plans, it might be something that doesn't work for me. If I'm in a good mood, I might tell you what works for me. But other than that, there's a period. That doesn't work for me. Like, and it's just that simple. You can't question that. You can't negotiate that because I didn't say shit about you and I said me. It doesn't work for me. So that's like my favorite one because I mean I do say no, but it depends on what that thing is. I can say no, but I'd like to be very clear that it doesn't work for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
love it. Simple, easy to remember, easy to practice, easy to go to. Well, thank you again so much for your time, your energy, your wisdom, all of it. So happy to have you on. Thank you, Bree.
Having me.
If you want to learn more about Bree, jump on Instagram and check out her page, Boundaries with Bree, Bree. She has a free boundary blind spot quiz that you can take to see where maybe your boundaries need a little bit more help. She also has a monthly membership program as well as one-to-one coaching. So if you want to check out those links, jump on her Instagram, Boundaries with Bree. And if you want to learn more about my one to one coaching or check out my book, Trust the Flames, jump on my website, www.katiedelmont.com, and you can find me on all the social media handles as the same name, Katie Delamont. Till next time.